Welcome to A Dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the writer for ADramOfOutlander.com. For all things Outlander, from the Diana Gabaldon book series to the Stars TV series and anything interesting that falls between. This is podcast episode 181, and we are covering season 5, episode 5, Perpetual Adoration. It was written for television by Alyson and Steve Koracki and directed by Menon. Hello! I hope you've had a fantastic week. We are sitting here butting up against episode 6, and I'm working as fast as I can in the current situation that we are all in. So this episode on first watch, I found to be very challenging, really kind of disconnected and bizarre, and while other people loved it, but then on a slower, contemplative watch, I guess is the right word, I really found that I enjoyed this episode, and there was a lot of subtlety that I missed first watch, and that when I actually sat down and reviewed it at a very slow pace, took me a long time to rewatch it, that I found a lot of gemstones, and I really found favor with this episode. I actually really enjoy overall when Claire voiceovers are used because we often don't get to know what's inside her head. In this episode, it was a little heavy-handed because it was all so serious. I really wish the voiceovers would be used to show her tenderness and humor. Often what we're missing in TV Claire, we don't get that internal dialogue that we get in the books. And she's really funny. And she's not always serious. There's this really unusual perspective that she has oftentimes that can be surprising. But I want multidimensional Claire, so I really wish they would use them a little bit more for other purposes than like this episode when it was all very heavy and very serious. So there was a really major Greek feel to her voiceovers with the spiders and the weaving webs, and I could see fate spinning off on the side, right? Is it God? Is it time? What is it? And Claire is somebody who I think has a deep faith, but she doesn't know what to do with it. She has all these supernatural things that happen to her. And I believe that she believes in God, but she's not religious. If she was religious, she'd be Catholic, and that's how she was raised. That's what she was married into twice. But it's a different faith than Jamie has. Like, her first faith is in medicine and science, but she can't explain everything with medicine and science, can she? I mean, she's a time traveler. The other thing I found really challenging in this episode was that Claire's memories, right? The devil, her memories, are all from her making penicillin and finding penicillin as she prepares to do the tonsillectomies on the Beardsley boys, right? And that all roads lead back to penicillin that killed a patient of hers before she left and took Brianna to London. And then they found out Reverend Wakefield died, and then they went to the funeral. And then they ran into Roger, and then everything led to her going back and them finding Jamie. And so this particular patient that died of penicillin, all roads led from him. So it's fascinating. It's an interesting take and twist on what the books have to say. But I found it a little challenging to follow that line from her being in her surgery on Fraser's Ridge, remembering in how they put it together. You know, jump to her talking to Brianna after she loses this patient, and then to the patient, and then right after the patient getting mad at the nurse at the desk for her not knowing this patient died when she came in to do his pretty routine surgery, and meeting with Joe Abernathy, and like all of it was discombobulated. And I presume that's for a purpose, because our memories are not always in a straight line, are they? But I found it difficult on the first viewing. I was like, I don't know if I like this episode. And then second viewing, it took me basically the whole episode to recognize that these are her memories and thoughts while she was in the 17th or 18th century, in the 1700s. And this was what was going in her head as she was preparing to inject the Beardsley twins with penicillin, which I find really interesting. Where did she get that glass vial and the needle? Or syringe, glass syringe, sorry. I was like, nothing survived that shipwreck. And nobody was making injectable syringes at that time because germs. We had different theories that we've talked about before on what makes us sick. So that was a little annoying. I wish we would have seen her talking to Brianna about making a syringe, because she's an engineer. She develops things. She draws. She can figure stuff out. That I wish that would have been included, that there would have been a step in that process, because that was very disconcerting to all of a sudden be like, hey, wait a second. Where did that syringe come from? And to not explain why she was injecting something in them, like that was not a normal thing then. Now we're used to injections and blood draws in a very different way. We're used to that tech. I don't think Mr. Bug or the Beardsley twins or anyone else who was present would have thought that was normal. Anyway, I digress. Okay. So we see several scenes of Claire in the Catholic Church that's supposed to be St. Finbarr's, which doesn't exist in Boston. I looked. Anyway, that she's there and they have the host. I will post some links, and I posted them on the Facebook group underneath the thread for this episode. Links to videos that explain Perpetual Adoration and what it is. It is in the Catholic Church and in some other Orthodox churches, I believe. It is not in widespread Protestant churches. And I had to really read about it to say, okay, why is this important? And so I did post some YouTube links that were really informative and interesting for those of you who are not Catholics. And it's fascinating. And I think even some who are Catholic in faith don't exactly know what it is. So basically, the bread and the wine are consecrated, if that's the right word. They're blessed. And some is held aside, and that is put into the particular what word am I looking for? All of a sudden my brain fizzled out. But it's held to be on display, and it's under glass, and the word is monstrance. It's the vessel in which the sacrament is placed. And that was displayed in the TV show St. Finbarr's. You could see it up front. And basically, it's a time to enter into a communion with the blood and body of Christ in a different way. Because of the differing belief systems between Catholicism and Protestantism, it's the literal transfiguration of the bread and wine into the blood and body of Christ. Even though you don't see the transformation, it happens. So anyhow, I do like that they brought it up, and in Claire's memories, we see that Graham Menzies sat every day at 4 p.m. That was his slot. And he did that ever since his wife died, as a way to be more connected, to be faithful. And she was in the church at his hour of adoration. And it's never to be left alone when the adoration hours are there. Some churches have it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, where it's always there. Some have particular times that they have an adoration. So I think it's fascinating. And if you do click on the videos and watch them, I'd like to hear your feedback. I imagine that it is an amazing spiritual practice. The other thing in Claire's portion of the episode is that reminds me of how Greek this really is in storytelling, is that she used the word eureka in order to exclaim, I found it, to a very pregnant Marsley when she sees the penicillin. Another part that has been added in, and I think for the love of the book readers, is that when Claire is at the hospital and she's in the surgeon's lounge, that she's looking for something to read, and there's all these journals and a Women's Day, I think it was, and those types of things. And then she picks up a romance novel that is well dog-eared, and it's called The Impetuous Pirate. And that's what she's reading when she's sitting on the bench waiting for Brianna to come so they can have lunch and she can make that proposal to her that she wants to take her to London. And it's so out of character for her to make that kind of proposal. But we realize in this that she's come from seeing Joe Abernathy before she goes to sit on the bench, and she starts making connections. And for her, looking at how is time God? Is it the fates, basically? Is it like when a spider feels the vibration of their prey in the web and those vibrations go out? Is that the nature of the strands of time? And as Diana Gabaldon explains it, that time is not a straight line. It reminds me of Doctor Who. Everything is kind of timey-wimey and bound up together, and things are all happening at the same time. Time travel is interesting. I just rewatched 12 Monkeys. It's one of my favorite movies. And I do not watch pandemic or epidemic movies. That's not my thing. I won't be watching any other ones. But I love that movie. But then it's the whole time problem that he crossed his own timeline. I'm like, I don't get how they did that. Anyhow. So she's really looking at how the pieces fit together, and that Graham Menzies not only reminds her of Jamie and the scars that Jamie holds for his country, right? And the battles he's been in and the life he's led, but his faithfulness is similar to Jamie's. And we see her starting to get that pull. Oh, maybe I need to go investigate this. Maybe I need to tell Brianna. Maybe I just need to go and be there. I mean, Frank was going to take her anyway, so it's really interesting, how she approached this process. And because her primary faith is in medicine, it's in science, right? Even though I think she does have a deeply rooted faith, and the experience that she had with all these supernatural elements happening to her, she's going to start questioning that stuff. How connected are these things? Was I meant to do this? Is this a blinking sign, an arrow saying, go here? Well, and ultimately, yes. It was the lighted arrow to say, this is where you're going, lady. So jump on board. And I like how they wrapped it up at the very end of the episode with that she really owes Graham Menzies, everything in his life and death and the connection she had with him really brought her full circle. And it brought her to honesty with her daughter and with herself, and that she couldn't just stay in the 20th century. Like, it wasn't okay. And it ultimately took her on that journey to them finding Jamie. See how long it took them to get the Arts Bureau rolls when they were looking and tracking Jamie? I'm holding that thought when we get to Knox. But some of the words were really, I found, beautiful in her voiceover. And I love this one. Time is a lot of things that people say God is. There's the pre-existing and having no end. There's the notion of being all-powerful because nothing can stand against time, not mountains, not armies. Give anything enough time and everything is taken care of. All pain encompassed, all hardship erased, all loss subsumed. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Remember, man, thou art dust, and unto dust thou shalt return. And if time is anything akin to God, I suppose that memory must be the devil. Yeah. And as she's preparing her samples and to do surgery on the Beardsleys, she seems almost cautious. That's not her normal character. She seems a little morose to me, or maudlin. And it's spurring so much emotion in her. And Claire's very passionate and emotional, but when it comes to her work, she tends to be pretty like, this is just what I do. This is how I process it. And she approached taking their tonsils out very differently than she normally approaches things, where she seems very in command and control. And she seemed hesitant almost, as if what happened with Graham Menzies just happened moments before. So it really had deep impact on her. So I've also included in my write-up a couple of videos on gallbladder removal, just because it's fascinating, and tonsillectomy and one with cautery. And it's slightly different than what Claire did. I just wanted to mention this part because I normally mention the medical stuff that happens. And the tonsillectomy with cautery that I put the link in for in the write-up really shows what infected tonsils look like. I mean, it's crazy. And I went back and rewatched the scene with her taking out one tonsil on Keziah, and it was very small. Now, there would have been more bleeding when Claire did it than in the videos that I put in the write-up, because she was using a different technique. It's an older technique, right? And she would have maybe gone into the muscle. She would have exposed the underlying tonsil, and so there'd be more bleeding, right? Then there would be, these videos show virtually no bleeding at all, and it's because of the newer processes. There's two different techniques that are amazing. But I wanted to show both because the cautery afterward, you see how effective it is against bleeding. But the tonsil that she pulled out was frankly way too small. It was a little tiny piece. I'm like, where's the rest of it? It would have been huge. There would have been scar tissue. And that's the other reason why there would have been bleeding too, is she wouldn't have just had this beautifully encapsulated tonsil that she could pull out. They would have had lots of scarring for the history of these boys having these throat issues and them not being attended to, and they would have been very enlarged. So there's my 2 cents on that. And the gallbladder removal that I have the video for in here also is going to be different because it's laparoscopic. It is not the surgery that people had in the late 1960s or up until not that long ago, where you'd have a very large incision, just like she was explaining to him. And it's like my husband's hernia incision. It almost looks like a C-section scar, but it's, off to the side. But it's a lengthy, it's got to be 6 inches long. And it's quite a scar that he has. And now it's just, you'd have these little spots that you'd see because they're done often laparoscopically, where it's little holes are placed. And they can kind of go in through these small incisions and do the same work. So again, it's much less traumatic than open surgery. But one of the video links that I posted actually shows the difference between laparoscopic, and it's all computer animation, and open incision. So I liked that video the best because it actually showed like what Claire would have done had she done the surgery versus what's done today. Can't always find documentation on what was. It's not as easy anymore. There's all these great videos on modern techniques, right? So even then, there was risk for infection, hence them wanting to give him penicillin. We didn't have this, all the different types of antibiotics that we do now. But it made sense, right? And I did not look up the false positives for someone not being allergic. I don't know what those are. That's something they put in the show, but I didn't look up. So the other part of when Claire, we see her back at St. Finbarr's, is the priest who sits down with her because she's there at Graham Menzies times and he's never seen her come in for the adoration. And I love what he said to her. Outside the love God has for his children, that sort of love and devotion between man and wife, there's nothing like it. Again, Claire is piecing together the strands of time calling her. And the priest says, no one's lost who's not forgotten. So and the devotion that Graham had for his wife, like he wouldn't even go to Scotland because his wife is buried there. I can't leave my wife. That's definitely the kind of devotion that Jamie has for Claire, through all of time. That's it. He would wait. So I do like them showing a Claire that is different than her portrayed character that can be very hard and can be very, I'm just going to do it and I'm right. And she can be very controlling, kind of in your face and bossy in a way but Claire, she's got some of that nature, but it's not her overriding nature. But I like that we got to see her tender, and really thinking, is there more? And when she approaches Bree with taking her, she's like, but why now? And when she explains that he died and she took some time off from work, that Brianna was like, whoa, this is not my mother. My mother doesn't take time off of work. She doesn't approach things in this way. And that really made her say, okay, let's go, Mom. I'll cancel my summer classes. And it's that thoughtfulness of Claire that we don't always see. And it took her off kilter before doing the surgery on the Beardsley twins. And so I did enjoy that, in that Marsley was the one who was bolstering her. She's like, but they're going to be fine, right? It's going to be great. And she was trying to give confidence because Claire seemed to lack confidence in that moment. And it sort of shook her to her core a little bit. Lizzie cracked me up in that. She was so upset. Anyway, so I do like how they approached Claire and what they did with her and how they showed us that transformation. And I think when we saw way back when they went to the funeral and Roger was there when they started this process and saw the aftermath of Brianna finding out, but we started seeing those breaks in Claire's, post Culloden return to Frank visage. Like we saw those cracks and everything she held together, and she controlled and she worked and she did what she did, and she was a doctor, and all those things that she had, that armor that she wore, those walls that she put up, they were cracking. And this episode, we see the beginning of those cracks forming. We see her thinking just something might be different. Something has to be done. And she's starting to open herself up for something different. Because if she hadn't have done that, she could have stayed in that box. She would have never have done any of these things and just presumed continually that Jamie had died. So I really like that. And part of her story and memories loop back into Roger, but we'll get there shortly. So Jamie rolls into Hillsborough, okay, trying to gain more militiamen, and finds out, right, that there's already redcoats there, and they're at William Reed's Ordinary. And that's a real place, and it's still standing in Hillsborough, North Carolina. Again, I put the link in the written post. And it's quite a beautiful building. I love that there are so many historical sites still available from the founding of the United States. The history is not always pretty, and it's stressful, and it's hard to reconcile sometimes. But I'm glad we have those memories because we need them. So Jamie comes into Knox and his men being there, and we find out that there's going to be full pardons for all the regulators except for Murtaugh. They don't want to fight. That's what the governor has said is going to happen. And Jamie's supposed to go out and disband the militia and to hand out pardons. And basically just because he's Scottish and so many of the men are Scottish. That's it. That's the only reason. But this is where we get the feeling that Jamie's web that he's been spinning himself, trying to stay on the side of loyalty and not breaking oaths to anyone as much as possible, except you always know that his heart is with his family first and foremost. That's his strongest oath, right? That his web is going to start disintegrating here. Like he's been weaving this for months and months and months, years, and he's losing grasp on it. So Jamie returns because Knox needed the muster rolls, and they're going to play chess. And this is where it starts getting really uncomfortable, and something is going down, right? Knox is like, I'm so glad that we're friends. And Jamie's like, keep your enemies closer. Like, Jamie would be friends with him if he could, probably. They're both men who have very similar goals and how they perceive loyalty and honor. They're both very honorable men in their ways. So, and Jamie's like, oh, girl, if you only knew. But we get this sense of foreboding and doom. Again, to me, that feels very Greek, like Greek tragedy, where something's coming. And Knox said he would like to have had Jamie next to him in battle, and he really wanted to make his extreme event at the jail mean something. Yeah, you murdered people. Okay, so while they're there and they're having a drink and haven't even started their chess game yet, there's an ominous knock on the door, right? and it's the Ardsmere roll. It's a copy. Now, they must have had an awesome fax machine or secure email, because given how difficult it was for Roger, the historian, to find it, or Claire to find the information in the 20th century, imagine how long it would have taken to ask for that from Scotland in the 18th century. I mean, minimum 5 or 6 months. So this was one of those weird little pieces where you're like, okay, I just have to let go of my disbelief. Suspend disbelief totally, because it doesn't make any sense. Sort of like Claire in that syringe, right? You're like, that's a weird thing. But the reason to me is weird, and it's something to note, is that it takes you out of the scene. It makes you go, what? And so anything that will jar you out of what's happening is a potential issue when it comes to how they're approaching the scenes. So somehow this miraculous copy of the Ardsmere prisoner rolls are there. And Jamie basically was like, you're going to find me on there. And he's like, of course, because James Fraser is a really common name. And then Jamie does full confession on him. That Murtaugh is his godfather, that Fitzgibbons is his middle name. And you see this is really good acting by the actor who plays Knox, but you see this really subtle shift of recognition in his face, and he goes through the papers, right? And you're like, oh, stuff is hitting a fan, people. And this is where Knox's duty, an oath to king and country and governor, right? Like, Jamie's a traitor hard, and he realizes Jamie let those other 2 regulators out of jail. He realizes that Jamie has been playing both sides this whole time, and it's getting real. And he wants to go and have Jamie arrested. And, Jamie said, my oath is to family first. That's the first oath I ever made. He didn't say the oath didn't matter that he made to king and country, but he said where his first oath lies. And Knox is he gets up, he pulls a knife on him, and he's going to get someone to arrest Jamie. And so Jamie grabs him, knocks him out, sticks him in bed, kills him. Knocks him out, chokes him to death, and then puts him in bed. And I'm like, won't there be marks on his neck? Huh. Thank goodness they didn't do autopsies in the 18th century. Huh. So Jamie makes it look like an accident, that because he closed the flue in the room, he grabs his muster roll, he burns the Ardsmere rolls, and escapes out. It makes it look like, Knox just had a smoke inhalation accident. I'm like, wouldn't that bruising come up? Maybe since he didn't use his hands. I don't know. I'm not a forensic doctor, so I'm not exactly sure, but I was like, thank God Claire wasn't there to be doing autopsies. Because it'd be real obvious that his windpipe was crushed, right? And there's other things like broken blood vessels and etc. to find it. So upon first viewing, I really thought it was out of Jamie's character. But then when I, again, sat down and watched it slowly and really listened to every word that was spoken, looked at every expression, the very body language, I was like, okay, yeah, Jamie totally would have killed him. So I totally changed my mind on that and covered it up. I thought they would handle this by him intercepting the Ardsmere rolls, but then that would just prolong the story that they're trying to tell, right? It would just prolong the fact that someone's going to out him somehow, some way. And he would have done it. Now, this is the part that made me really uncomfortable, because now forever, Adso is going to be known as #MurderKitty, because he climbs down the side of the building, right? And he finds this cute little kitten. Oh, so cute. Oh, who doesn't love Adso, right? Even if you're not a cat person, you've got to think Adso is really cute. I would take a basket of Adsos. But, Jamie finds this kitten and sticks this cat in his bag. And I'm like, oh, so Adso's now MurderKitty. That was just like, why didn't he find him on the way home? Like when he stopped to pee or something, or it's quite a ride from Hillsborough back to the Ridge. So did he not have to camp out? There could be wild cats. And anyway, MurderKitty it is forever. Anyway, so his arrival home, so for his character, he's just that razor's edge of oath, duty, honor, who first? Family, obviously, right? And he felt really bad about having to kill Knox, because they were kindred in so many ways. But he gets home and he greets Claire and gives her the kitten and explains his mother's cat was named that too, and they're almost identical. And Claire's like, he's so cute. Right? Who doesn't love a kitten? And this is where Claire and Jamie's parts merged, right? Jamie's like, I have a lot to tell you, but it looks like you have stuff on your mind, so let me talk to you first. And he's always so in tune to her, which I love. So the other thing about this that I love about Jamie is that we're getting to see the king of men. Like, we're seeing him act as Jamie. He is a bloody man, right? And he's a man of faith. He's a man of blood. He's a man of war. He's a man of family. He's a man of heart. Like, he's all these things. And he's a highly educated man. And he is a philosopher and a politician too, unwittingly and unwillingly, but he is. But the fact that he can step aside all these things that just happened to be a really humble and loving husband is pretty good. And they're really getting to see the fullness of Jamie this season, which I'm so happy for. It's really in character for him. So in this, Claire thanks Jamie. And then she tells him, remember my patient that I said died of penicillin? She kind of goes into it a little bit. And that she has realized in this process of finding the penicillin, preparing it, testing the Beardsley twins. She's found that he's that arrow, that he was that thread that pulled her where she needed to go. And that she owes him because his death profoundly affected her. And that's why they went to London. And that's how they ran into Roger. And he really brought her here. And without Graham Menzies, without that even super short relationship and encounter, she would never have returned. She would never have found Jamie. They would never have this life. So I love that. I love that we were able to wrap up. And that's where it go, oh, so she was just thinking about this the whole time. And our memories are not straight. They come and go and pop up and you go, oh, yeah. And so we did get to have that disconcerting feeling along with Claire, because they don't come in these nice, tidy packages when we remember things. Things just pop up as we go. And that's what was happening to Claire. And so it was happening to us as viewers too. And I thought that was a very interesting way of doing it, though it was challenging for me one watch through. So finally we get to Brianna and Roger, right? And what was going on with them. I kind of kept them together because what was going on really was about them and Stephen Bonnet. And they have to get Roger to stop complaining. I'm hoping after episode 6, we're going to see him move forward a little bit. and stop being so insecure. So we see them in postcoital snuggles, and he asks if she enjoyed herself. And my thought was, dear man, if you have to ask, ... She may have enjoyed herself, but didn't have an orgasm, which is what you were really asking. So if you don't know if she had an orgasm, she probably didn't. I'm just going to throw that out there. And so we see some tender moments, and have been very impressed with the growth of Sophie Skelton, and I'm starting to finally believe her as Brianna. TV Brianna. She's definitely not book Brianna. But I can see her in this character now, finally. It's taken a lot of work. And they're talking about things, and she's like, Mackenzie University, that'd be a great idea. Roger's like, but I haven't made an oath to your dad and to the militia, so that comes first, right? It's important, and it's an honorable thing. So we're seeing that Roger's a man of honor as well, and that oaths are very important, and the oath he made to her father is vital. So we get to see him being kind of set up in that way. So then I started thinking, are Roger's insecurities his hidden spiders? Because that was another voiceover talking about what's hidden in us. I think so. Are they waiting to lash out? And in this instance, Brianna was his victim when he finds the black diamond that he already knows was Bonnet's from their card game on the ship, and that he was cheated out of winning. So Brianna comes in and he says, what is it? And holds it up. And as an aside, I really love Brianna in pants. She's working on the ridge. I love that she's just owning that. And here, where we're kind of seeing Roger's hidden spider, whatever that's hiding, right? Brianna has been a weaver of lies. And hers are just completely unraveling. Like disintegrating right here. You know, she'd already told Roger about seeing Bonnet, but now she tells the whole story. And Roger just can't understand in his own insecurity why she would keep this gift from Bonnet. And she's like, well, I kept it for Jemmy because it's his ticket, out of here if needed, if he can travel, right? Roger doesn't buy it. He's like, no, there's more to this. And he keeps digging. Why did Bonnet give it to her? Because he's like, he wouldn't have used it to save his own mother, kind of thing. And then we get to the heart of it. The heart of her web of lies, that she told Bonnet the kid was his because he was going to die and she wanted to give him comfort. And she apologizes to Roger. And it's very believable. And she's like, they were just words. And he's like, words matter. Which I agree, words matter. Thank you, Roger. Words have consequences. The thing is, Roger is really hurt because she's never said to him that Jemmy is his. She's like, how could I ever know? I don't know. And she can't say she believes Jemmy is Roger's. But Roger's also not dying in front of her, and she had that weird stroke of compassion for Bonnet in an effort to free herself and to forgive him. That's what it was. It really had nothing to do with Bonnet, except in the sense of that she wanted to release that from herself, right? And so, they're at loggerheads. And Roger's pretty angry, takes up his gun and leaves. So we see Roger the next morning. He's pouting under a tree. And he hears something, gets up and runs over with the gun. And it's Claire. She was out before dawn looking for golden seal. Golden seal is an amazing herb that can be used to keep infection away. It's very powerful. That's what I, at home, after the cord is clamped and cut, I tap the golden seal over the cord, and until the cord dries up and falls off, it's there to keep bacteria at bay. Anyway, we just keep putting it on every diaper change. So he's been there all night, and Claire's like, I've been married a long time. I can tell there's something going on between you and Brianna, right? And he said he wishes he had husband intuition. She's like, you haven't been married long enough to have that, Roger. Besides the fact that she was married more than once. Most of her time with Frank, but she knew Jamie so well. And she says that she and Frank had a very complicated marriage. And that it's been on her mind a lot. And she doesn't mind talking about it. And Roger talks about another web, and Claire's lie to Brianna about who her biological father was. And she's like, no, I don't regret that. We had to raise her and make her feel safe and give her love, and that she had two parents who deeply cared about her. What child could understand that? Like, why would I put that on a child? And she's like, oh, yeah, I would do it again. Heartbeat. And of course, he's asking her that question, but he's thinking of Jemmy and himself. Like, it's not important for Jemmy to know. It doesn't matter right now. It's important that they love that kid the best they can. Even though it's important to Roger that he's the biological father or not. That's not really to do with Jemmy. That has to do with Roger. So I love this scene where she really gives him good counsel. And she was like, Roger, you were there when Brianna found out. The truth really hurts sometimes. Really hurts. Again, it has consequences, right? And she's like, you were there. Don't forget that. You saw what happened to her. So this really, Roger's like, thank you for talking to me. He really needed a kick in the teeth by Claire to get out of his own head and stop moping and pouting and to really look at the big picture and what's important. And so Claire did really give him some excellent advice. I'm so thankful. So he returns back to the cabin and he brings Brianna back a gift of chanterelles as a peace offering, and he apologizes. And then the rest of her web disintegrates of lies, falls apart when she says Stephen Bonnet's alive. Like, she actually moves closer to him and say there's one more thing. He's alive, and yes, people have seen him. And I think he approached Mrs. Bug when they were in Williams Creek. And Roger finally kind of like matures in the moment and just says, I don't care why you didn't tell me, but we'll figure this out. We'll figure it out. And Brianna like broke down and says, she's basically being terrorized by him. She sees him everywhere. Finally, she's sharing her torment with her spouse because Roger, they're kind of living in these two separate worlds where they're not letting each other in for whatever reason. We do things a lot for fear. Lots of reasons for fear, like whether we're going to be out of control, we're going to say the wrong thing, we're going to hurt somebody else. But they're holding it, and now the stuff has been let go. It's been put in the light and not hidden anymore, right? So he can finally understand his wife and help her. And she can finally see really how this is affecting Roger. It's those layers and layers of things that are affecting him. He has a lot of trauma as well. So he's like, you're right. As soon as we can find out if Jemmy can time travel, we're going to take this. It's a ticket home. So they wrapped that up nice and tidy. So I like that we ended the episode, their portion, in a place of security and safety, just like we ended with Claire and Jamie. That's where we needed to be. And the webs that had to fall apart, fell apart. We still don't have security and safety when it comes to Bonnet and Jemmy, or with what's going to happen with Murtaugh and that sort of thing. But we're almost halfway through the season, so we see a lot of good movement. I mean, again, really impressed with the detail that was easily missed the first time through. So the closing voiceover by Claire. God the infinite, God the merciful, God the eternal, Someday I will stand before God and I will receive answers to all my questions about everything in his universe. And I do have many questions. But I won't ask about the nature of time. I've lived it. Dun dun. She has lived it. So I'm not sure what that says about her true faith and her feelings, but she's open. And as we know, when she's in the 18th century, the second time around, there are so many things that she's experienced that you can't but contribute to something bigger than her, a creator, something. And though her faith walk looks vastly different than Jamie's, and again, I'm so thankful we're seeing his foundation and why he does what he does. Now he makes sense. Now the choices he makes go, yes, okay, gotcha. So I really loved how this went. The next episode is supposed to be Jocasta getting married to Duncan Innes. The previews are awesome. And, the dandy Philip Wiley is coming back. So I want to hear from you. Comments, questions, thoughts. 719-425-9444 is the voice line. contact@adramaofoutlander.com is the email. You can always find me at the Facebook page and group. That's A Dram of Outlander. On Twitter and Instagram, it's Dram of Outlander without the A in front. And of course, the website is adramaofoutlander.com. So I hope you are well. And this time that we're all social distancing, that this is a little bit of salve to you, a little light in this scary time. And I cannot wait to do another podcast. So until next time, Slàinte mhath.